Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Thursday, September 15th, 2022. I'm Reese Colbert, sitting in for Roland, who is in New York. He might be dropping in to tell us what he's up to. In the meantime, here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. More migrants get escorted out of Florida. Some ended up in Martha's Vineyard, while others were dropped off in front of Vice President Kamala Harris's D.C. home. Detroit gets a substantial grant to reconnect a Black community separated by what's called one of the shortest interstate highways in the country. A new study could explain why more Black people get stopped by police for traffic stops than whites. I'll talk to one of the authors of the study. A sexual trafficking victim who killed her rapist must pay the rapist's family restitution. And we'll take a look at why white folks got their panties in a bunch over Disney's The Little Mermaid. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's rolling.
Governor Ron DeSantis continues to spend millions to bus and fly migrants to other cities. This morning, 2 busloads of migrants got dropped off in front of Vice President Kamala Harris's home. Wednesday, about 50 migrants unexpectedly arrived by plane on Martha's Vineyard. They had no money, and most, if not all, do not speak English. The chair of Martha's Vineyard Democratic Committee said this: the migrants did not know where they were.
I think confused is the first thing that comes to mind. They have no idea where they are. They were told that they were coming somewhere where there would be jobs and housing waiting for them. And they landed here and no one was here to welcome them. We had no idea they were coming, and they were just extremely confused, trying to explain to them where they are. They have no idea where they are. No one speaks English, so we had to get some translators down there. But I would say that, when it was a little, it was very unnerving to know that there's a governor in the country that would just traffic people to another state, just dump them there like garbage.
The aid workers,
He's just sending the migrants to places that want them.
We are not a sanctuary state, and it's better to be able to go to a sanctuary jurisdiction. And yes, we will help facilitate that transport for you to be able to go to greener pastures. Biden would fly people in the middle of the night, dump them all across this country. There was no warning on any of this. And all those people in D.C. and New York were beating their chests when Trump was president, saying they were so proud to be sanctuary jurisdictions, saying how bad it was to have a secure border. The minute even a small fraction of what those border towns deal with every day is brought to their front door, they all of a sudden go berserk, and they're so upset that this is happening. And it just shows you, their virtue signaling is a fraud.
Terry addressed the migrants being shipped off earlier today.
And when you say there's a legal way of doing this, are you implying that the way it's being done now is illegal?
So I'll say this. We've been asked about if we're going to take any legal action. I would refer that to the Department of Justice, but there is a process. There's a process of taking in migrants. There's a process that is in place, and what they are doing is a legal stunt, is a political stunt, and it's really just disrespectful to humanity. It doesn't afford them any dignity what they're doing when you are abandoning families and children in a place where they were told they were going to get housing, in a place where they were told they were going to get jobs, or abandoning on the DC streets. It is just cruel, and it's not about the process. Actually, it's about a political tool, a political stunt that they're moving forward with.
The migrants who are being ushered out of Florida are asylum seekers. They have been allowed to stay in this country by the U.S. Customs, Border and Protection until their petitions go through the system. Let's go to the panel. Joining us every Thursday is the great Dr. Carr, Department of African American Studies from Howard University, Dr. Jason Nichols, Senior Lecturer from African American Studies Department of University of Maryland College Park, and Michael Imhotep, host of the African American History Network show. Hey, fellas. Thank you for joining us and joining me.
Good to see you, Reese.
thank you. Thanks for having us.
How you doing, Queen Reese?
Oh,
How you doing, sister?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm actually quite livid about what we just saw. I take really strong objection to calling this a political stunt when we're talking about human beings being trafficked. That's what's happening. This is kidnapping and human trafficking, all for these degenerate governors to get their shits and giggles off at the expense of very vulnerable people. Dr. Carr, start us off with your reaction to these games being played with the lives of real people.
Well, yes, thank you, Reese. And like I say, it's good to see you in that seat. You've been busy all week, sis. I don't know how you're doing it. You're the hardest working woman in the news business this week. but yeah, I enjoy this, and I'm encouraged by it, in fact. Because we look at these folks as human because they are human. Andrew DeSantis, that pufferfish, that piece of human garbage, is trying to run for president, as we know. We know that his great-grandmother, Luigi Carlucci, who couldn't read or write, when she showed up at Ellis Island from Italy in 1921 in February, the federal government passed a law that said we're not letting people who can't read or write in the country, but the law went into effect in May. So, but for several months, we had to worry about this pufferfish because his great-grandmother wouldn't have been in the country. As for the shove-mouth bastard in Texas, he too is running for president. Doug Ducey, another racist, in Arizona, lining it up. And going to Massachusetts, there's a Republican governor up there. They don't see anybody in this as a human being. But I'm encouraged by it because this is what they do in the South. This country has never been a country for them. These white nationalists, there was a time when they shipped black people out of the South. To go to graduate school, they said, you can't go to graduate school in the South. We'll ship you to the Midwest. We'll pay for you to go to school anywhere else. They gave one-way bus tickets to black people for decades to send them out. So they're doing what they should be doing. And I say that for this reason. Because we've seen this before, because we know they're no respecters of law, because they lie to these people and tell them their jobs and housing somewhere, which actually might come just close to being afoul of the law, because if they went against their will or they were coerced or they were lied to, it might amount to kidnapping. They are trying very desperately to embrace this notion of hatred as a state issue that they can use to propel themselves to perhaps the presidency. But as Lindsey Graham showed us this week, we all know that hatred, federalism goes by the board when you're trying to make white nationalism your campaign at the national level too. So I'm encouraged by this because they're going to finally break it, I think. I want them to continue to do this because it's white Christian national. It's white, what should I say? It's white theology. It's white nationalist theology. It's not Christianity, as a sign I saw the other day said. In Illinois, the church had a sign that said, of course we're pro-immigrant. We're Christians.
Right.
But, yeah, he's not a Christian. He's a Klansman down there in Florida. So keep doing it.
Yeah, to me, it's demonic. That's what it is. They freaking devil worshippers, if you ask me. And they're really revealing their lack of humanity. I mean, they've been attacking women, for instance. They've been attacking black people. They've been attacking the citizenship of American U.S.-born citizens. So it's no surprise that they would attack the humanity and just the ability to even exist where they are legally allowed to be at this time. But, to your point, Dr. Carr, what are laws if this isn't illegal? I mean, if it's not illegal to take people who can barely speak English and say, come here on this boat, or on a boat, but on this bus, on this plane, and where you go, you'll have the opportunity to stay together with your family. There's food, there's opportunities, and yet when they actually land there, they're completely oblivious to what they're really into. Dr. Nichols, I was looking at some footage from Fox News, and they were just giddy with this whole thing. They were reporting on this like this was like, people arriving, you're like people running a marathon and you're waiting to see who's going to pass the finish line first, and you're interviewing the people at the end of it. And what was striking for me was just the happiness of the people getting off the bus. I mean, the person on Fox News was greeting people right off the bus. So at that point, that can barely speak English, it hasn't even hit them yet that this is all a trick being pulled on them. The wool is being pulled over their eyes. What's your reaction to just the way that these people are being violated?
Yeah, well, I'm in agreement with you and Dr. Carr in the sense that it's clear that they were playing games with people's lives. And we have to understand, in terms of a secure border, the last time we had a major surge was in 2019. You didn't hear Ron DeSantis or any of these people speak up at that time, except to say that we need a wall. They allegedly built something and nothing happened. It didn't really fix anything. And we've seen that a lot of the things that they've talked about and that they try to do have been ineffective. Instead of trying to come up with solutions, which I think this administration, while they're not perfect, this administration has tried to come up with solutions. They've talked to the other nations. Mexico has devoted about $1.1 billion to help with the issues on our border. Vice President Harris rightly went down to address the root causes that we've seen in terms of climate change and other things in Central American countries, and help stabilize some of those places so that we don't have these issues. But we have to also understand that this is a legal process by which these people are coming in. And the big part is that they're being misled. They're being told these things. And as a matter of fact, in Texas, when they were pulling these buses out to begin with, at first they were stopping in Georgia and people were getting off the bus in Georgia. And all of a sudden, people complained. The Republicans started to complain, so they changed the routes, that the buses were taking from Texas to get to New York and to get to other places. It's really disgusting and despicable. And Ron DeSantis is pretty much a pick-me politician. So he's pretty much doing anything to get people's attention. This whole thing about voter integrity, which we know is a joke, and those 20 people are all going to get off because it's illegal, but he doesn't, what he's doing, but he doesn't care. It's all about the spectacle, and it doesn't matter that these are vulnerable people, as you said, U.S.-born people, or whether they're other people who were born outside of the United States. As long as he gets a headline and he gets mentioned on Fox and Friends, and he can start to propel himself on the national stage, that's pretty much all that matters to him. And this is really troubling when we're talking about people with babies in their arms, that we are doing that. Instead of trying to find solutions and saying, hey, I've got a solution for what's going on the border, they're just shipping people and hoping they get news coverage. It's despicable and disgusting.
Yeah, it really is. And, if Ron DeSantis is looking for a headline, here's one for you. Ron DeSantis is a piece of shit. That should be a headline. Greg Abbott is a piece of shit. There's another headline for you. If you want headlines, those should be the headlines. Lock them up. How about those for some damn headlines? Because I am sick of the way that this is being covered on the media, as though this is just another part of political gamesmanship of people just trying to angle for 2024, when this has real dire consequences. Michael, Dr. Nichols brings up the point about the border being secure. In my judgment, and I think that there's a lot that we can, as people of conscience, quibble with about the American immigration system and how inhumane it is. We saw the disgusting treatment of Haitian refugees. They're getting shipped back before they can even touch down. But if we're just talking strictly in terms of a security basis, in my view, security looks like what we have in the sense of people try to cross the border, they're caught. I don't like to use that word, but let's just talk about it in strictly security senses. They're caught, they go through an orderly process. It's not always the most pleasant process for them, but it is orderly. They are put in the system to have their case adjudicated. That, to me, is security. What we're seeing these Republicans do, that's the opposite of security. They're actually creating the chaos. To me, an insecure border would be having, a dozen or so migrants pop up in a random city like, hey, y'all, anybody got anything for us? We here now. Like, that's not a secure border. So, what's your take on just the way that these folks have just been plopped in here and the kind of chaos that it's actually causing for not just the people that are experiencing this injustice, but also for the states and the cities that have to react to this influx of people who don't even know how to fend for themselves at this point?
Right. So, there's a number of different things going on, and there's a deep historical context to this as well, even before Texas and Florida become states in the union. Number one, Florida needs to be desanitized, number one. They're both up for re-election in November 2022. Both need to be voted out of office and taken out of power. And this is what happens when you don't have policies to really benefit people, and they focus on the cruelty. Yeah. They're both trying to out-Trump Trump. They focus on the cruelty. So you look at DeSantis in Florida. And what's really interesting, and Greg may want to weigh in on this, at one time, Florida was free territory, and runaway African slaves ran into Florida to get away from the white supremacists. Now you got the white supremacists who are taking people who are immigrating from these other countries, and some of these other countries, to be quite frankly, were conquered by Christopher Columbus and have never been the same. They've been screwed up for over 500 years or so. They've never been the same from what's happened. The colonization has happened to them. So we see this is like part of the epitome of white fear, which is Roland's book.
Yeah.
This is the fear of the browning of America. And what happens when you have white supremacists who have power to inflict harm upon them, but they're trying to do this for votes. So people have to be smarter than this. These people have to be taken out of office. Possibly, if the evidence is there, they can be prosecuted by the Department of Justice as well. I don't know if this will qualify as kidnapping. Don't have all the details. Possibly could. But, you know, and then you have Governor Greg Abbott out of Texas, and he sent, if I remember correctly, he sent migrants he sent them to Washington, D.C. Muriel Bowser had to declare a state of emergency. At that time, this was a couple of weeks ago, he had spent $12 million deporting migrants. But this is the same guy who said he was going to eliminate rape.
Right.
How's that going?
Right.
I haven't heard anything about him eliminating rape. So this is what happens when you have the wrong people in office. You gotta vote and take these people out of power.
Yes. Well, speaking of voting in midterms, I have 2 books that actually expose how much of a piece of shit these people are. But not only that, what they're really up to, what they've done already, what they're planning for the next term. So go ahead and pick that up, long and short of a guide to the 2022 midterms. The must-watch races and the radical Republicans, if you really want to see me drag them. But anyway, with that being said, we have to head to a break. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds. As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Eric Nolan.
What's up, y'all? I'm Will Packer.
I'm Chrisette Michelle.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
We've all known that black motorists get stopped more often than whites. Now there's a new study that may explain why. Joining me from Cambridge, Massachusetts, it's one of the authors of Measuring Racial and Ethnic Disparities in Traffic Enforcement with Large-Scale Telematics Data, PhD student Johan Gabler. Johan, thank you so much for joining us. I had a chance to read the Washington Post article on your study, and it was really fascinating. The biggest takeaway for me is really just about how the disparities are not based on the behavior of the drivers, but based on how they're targeting certain areas for traffic enforcement. So for the viewers who haven't heard anything about your study, can you just give us an overview of what you found?
Yeah, thank you very much, Reese. First of all, I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here. So usually when researchers try to study these kinds of things, the only way to tell after the fact whether someone was speeding is if they got a traffic ticket. And so that means that it's really hard to say anything at all about the people who were speeding but didn't get a ticket. So if all you have are speeding tickets, you can't really calculate things like whether police are giving a lower percentage of white speeders tickets than black speeders. So what we were able to do that was really novel is we were able to look at where and when people were speeding, regardless of whether they got a ticket. And what we found is that drivers were speeding the same amount on average in neighborhoods where most of the residents were black as neighborhoods where most of the residents were white. But the same thing wasn't true for speeding tickets. So the number of tickets police were issuing for speeding varied quite a bit between different neighborhoods. And when we looked into the data, as you were saying, a big driver of this seemed to be speed traps. So, police weren't enforcing speeding evenly all over the city. Instead, speeding enforcement was concentrated on a few small areas. So, something like 50% to 75%, of all the tickets that were being issued in places where only about 10% of the city residents actually lived. And so when, where police put these speed traps is making a huge difference. In some cities, these speed traps seem to actually be more concentrated in white neighborhoods. But in most of the cities we looked at, the speed traps were mostly located in areas with more black and Hispanic residents. And so even though people living in different communities seemed to speed more or less the same amount, some of those communities were bearing a much heavier burden in the form of more speeding tickets.
One of the things that I found was interesting, like you said, most of the cities, the enforcement levels in terms of the speed traps were higher in areas that had less white people. Houston was the one city or one of the few cities that was different. I have a theory as to why that is, but I'm curious, when you found that information, did you have information on the racial demographics of the people stopped in Houston? And can you just explain for the viewers what the Houston findings that you found were?
Yeah, so Houston was one of the cities that I mentioned where we seemed to find that actually a larger number of white drivers were being pulled over for speeding. And, initially we were quite surprised by that result. But ultimately, it really seemed to be a function of, where the speeding traps were being placed. And so, we don't always know exactly why police departments are choosing to place speeding traps in certain areas versus others. But, in this particular case, it seems that they made some decisions about where they were going to enforce speeding that ended up having this disproportionate effect. That was somewhat unusual among the cities we looked at.
So can you clarify, so you're saying that white drivers were ticketed at a higher rate in Houston, not just white areas were enforced. Can you clarify that part for me?
Yeah, so we don't know directly. So we were looking, as you mentioned, this is a good point. We were looking at the demographics of certain areas. Mm-hmm. And we do know the demographics of the people who were pulled over. And so, there's a pretty strong correlation between the race of people who were being pulled over in certain neighborhoods and the race of people who lived in those neighborhoods. So based on that data, it seems like probably the race of the drivers is the same as the race of the people in those neighborhoods. But, you can drive anywhere. Yeah. And so, people could be, getting pulled over in areas that are different from where they live.
Because I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if it was more black people still getting pulled over in that Houston area, maybe as a deterrence method or something. But I know that's not your finding. That's just my hypothesizing. The one thing I did want to ask you, though, too, is, when you talk about speed traps, did you look at all into like the cameras that they put up, those kind of digital traps, or was it strictly looking at police activity in these areas?
Yeah, so we were just looking at, actual stops, traffic stops. And, I think that it's a really important point, actually, because, one of the sort of recommendations that we have for policymakers is, even these sort of seemingly small decisions about where you put speeding traps can have these big unintended consequences in terms of the disparities that arise. And so, traffic safety is really important, but, there are other ways to keep people from speeding that don't lead to these kinds of disparities and don't have the kinds of, potentially really negative consequences of traffic stops. So, one obvious option is to police more evenly across the city instead of relying on a small number of speed traps. But another, better option is to use, at least in my opinion, is to use things like speed bumps and roundabouts and other ways of ensuring that drivers are driving safely that don't necessitate pulling anybody over at all.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I did notice in the article you talked about these more deterrent factors that don't involve police activity. And when you mentioned speed bumps, a good friend of mine, she had to jump through hoops and petition her neighbors and stuff like that just to get a speed bump on the street. So I would be interested to see if there are any kind of disparities in that kind of activity of where speed bumps get approved and how many hoops people have to jump through. But I'm not trying to put more work on you.
No, I think that's a really interesting question, and I would love to know the answer to that as well. I think that's really important.
Well, I have some really smart people on the panel too, and so I'm going to give them the opportunity to ask a question, starting with Dr. Carr.
Oh, thank you, Reese. I was enjoying that conversation, and thank you for your work, Johan, you and your colleagues. Just a quick question. You write that you don't know why they're setting the traps where they are, and that perhaps even some of this is unintentional. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about intentionality as it correlates with race. And because once race is factored in, it seems to me that the Houston outlier is maybe very well explained by the fact that there's a black mayor who used to be a policeman. There's a black police chief. The city is 2/3 non-white, and the police force, the biggest cluster of police, are black. So it seems to me that people might put traps in places to get some of them white minorities, whereas in those other cities, I mean, it's very intentional where people put traps. So any thoughts about the use, kind of juxtaposing race against the intentionality as to where these traps are set?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting question. In our study, as you said, we weren't really able to tell if officers were intentionally discriminating or not. But, it's possible that the conclusions of our study, so that we were seeing police pulling over more people for speeding in black neighborhoods, even though those drivers weren't actually speeding more in those neighborhoods, could be happening just because there are more speed traps in those neighborhoods. But as you say, that really just moves the problem up a level. So if that's the case, then I think policymakers really need to be asking why there are more speed traps in those neighborhoods, and to be thinking about, whether there are better ways to promote traffic safety.
Let me ask you a quick question. This is going to be a very basic question, but how do you define speed traps exactly? Is it a cop waiting in the cut is it a cop waiting in the cup to try to get people, or what exactly does that mean in terms of speed traps?
Yeah, so when I'm talking about speed traps, what I mean is that there are these very small, areas, maybe like a block or something like that, where you see a very, very, very large number of stops. And so, I don't know if that is specifically because, say, there's like a policy in the police department that says that, we're going to patrol this specific intersection, or if it's just something that happens sort of more kind of organically. But when I talk about speed traps, what I mean is just these pockets where there's extremely high enforcement compared to, other places. So if you're just driving down a random road, it's not all that likely that you'll get pulled over. But, I think a lot of people know this about like their own hometowns. There are certain places where, if you're speeding on this particular road, or as you come around this turn, there's a high likelihood that you're going to get a ticket versus, on a different part in a different area or a different street, there's not really anyone sort of patrolling for speeding there.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Michael, do you have a question for Johan?
Yeah, Johan, thanks for the study. And, studies like this are really important because it documents what we as African Americans already think. And policy has to be crafted around the evidence. Have you so far shared your findings with any of these police departments that you looked at the research on, and to find out from them why it is what it is. And if you haven't shared it with any of the police departments, do you have any plans to?
Yeah, so we haven't shared these results yet. They only became public very recently, but
Right.
I think that, something that we really would like to do is to try to work with these departments to try to craft better policy that doesn't lead to these negative outcomes like big disparities in who's getting pulled over. And so if there were departments that, were looking to do something like that, I think that would be an area that we're really excited to do work in. And our hope for this research ultimately is that it will help drive policy change and lead to better traffic enforcement practices, not just, for people to read it and then just kind of move on and keep doing things exactly the way they've always been doing them.
Right, because there's a financial component to this, which is really important, because if you get a speeding ticket, now you have to go to court, you have to pay it, you get points on your insurance, points on your record, increase in insurance, things like this. If you get stopped, you may have expired tags, you may be driving on a suspended license. So now you're compounding these things, and which cause more financial harm to many African Americans disproportionately. So there's a huge financial component to this as well.
Yeah, I think that that's really true. And, there are other components even just beyond, obviously there's the risk involved in being pulled over in the first place, which, can, in the most serious cases, can lead to like really terrible things happening. But also,
right.
If you get a speeding ticket, that you don't just have to pay the ticket. Now this is going to affect your insurance too. There are all of these carry-on consequences. And so if there are ways to, to reduce speeding and to keep the roads safe that don't lead to these negative consequences, I think that those are avenues that are really important to pursue. Things like, putting in speed bumps, as we were discussing a moment ago, and putting in roundabouts, and sort of trying to, maintain traffic safety in a way that is not creating these, great burdens, as you said.
Exactly. Thank you.
I know for me, I would be looking at your map to figure out where not to drive down. if they're that obvious, then hey, let's obviously avoid those particular intersections. I mean, I'm not suggesting people, speed. I'm just saying maybe stay.
That comes with the race. It's in our DNA. We always know where the pedal rollers are. I can't speak for all the brothers, but I know, at least as a black man, I know you two brothers, we always know where the police are at all times.
I know that's right. Dr. Nichols, do you have a question or comment for Johan?
Yes, absolutely. So first off, Johan, I think Dr. Carr and I will probably both agree and second this. Keep publishing, keep publishing, keep publishing. The other thing is I was wondering, I do have a comment, and actually, just to kind of counter something, it's the first time, mark it on your calendars. I think I kind of disagree with something Dr. Carr said. Usually I'm getting a sore neck from nodding my head at everything Dr. Carr ever says.
Wow.
But I'm going to disagree a little bit. Because coming from the Baltimore area and the Philadelphia area, we've had black mayors, we've had black police chiefs, we've had all of that, and majority of color police officers, and still had these very same issues. If you paid attention to the Gun Trace Task Force in Baltimore, I was listening to an interview with the main guy, Wayne Jenkins, who's a white man. Surprised me that there's a white man named Wayne Jenkins. But Wayne Jenkins said, this wasn't racial. We only policed in black neighborhoods. And it was like, you really have some cognitive dissonance there. So I definitely think that it's, that sometimes this is systemic, and it doesn't matter the color of the mayor, the police chief. It seems like it's the way we police. We've got an issue with it nationwide. Now, as far as the research that you were doing, I'm wondering if, because I had read some other research before that says that police officers oftentimes pull over people during the daytime. That's when the biggest racial disparity is, because they can see in the car. And I'm wondering if your research kind of looked at a little bit of that. And my other question is, do you think, and I know, as a researcher, you try not to, kind of pontificate on these things, but do you think that some of these stops are in order to get reasonable suspicion to search Black vehicles and Black people who are drivers?
Yeah, thank you. Those are really interesting and important questions. So in this study, we weren't able to look at it, but the study that you're talking about, or there have been some that do this, what's sometimes called the veil of darkness test, where you compare the rates of people being pulled over in the daytime when officers can see drivers race more easily compared to the nighttime when they can't. And it's true that you do see differences, right? So, this is not a study that I've worked on, but some of the co-authors, other people like Shard Goyle, who worked on this study with me, have, done these studies in the past. And they do find what you're saying, which is that, in the daytime, you see larger racial disparities than what you see at nighttime. I'm sorry, can you repeat your second question?
Do you think that this is some of these stops in these communities are in order to produce reasonable suspicion or probable cause to make searches? Yeah,
so the same study, in fact, which is the study that we got our data on stops from, looked at a related issue, which is, they tried to look at how stops were happening before and after marijuana was legalized in a number of states. And what they saw is that, the number of stops and searches that occurred kind of went down once, this was no longer available as a pretext for searching cars. So, I don't want to speculate too much since this isn't what I specifically was working on in this study, but I think certainly there is evidence that's pointing to, in the scientific literature, that's pointing to the things that you're talking about here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm interested in that information as well, because I think for me, like I started off the segment saying, it's important to have data. We know that we, as Black folks, we aren't that much, more criminal or likely to speed or do all these other things. I think speeding is human nature. We all got some place to be, yesterday. So it's important to have data to back that up, though, so that it can turn into policy prescriptions that help, hopefully, in theory, make things more equitable. But I am definitely, curious to see data about, well, even though, let me just rewind a little bit. Your original point about if you're only looking at the traffic tickets, you're going to get skewed data. So if you're only looking at if you're only looking at the arrest data that result from the traffic stops, it makes it seem like perhaps Black people have more likely to have things on them, whereas it might be the case that cops are more likely to look for things as opposed to, having a higher rate of things. So I think there's so many things that you can do to build on or marry this data up with. How can people follow you, get more information with you and your co-authors, and see more about this study that you've done?
Yeah, so you can find the study and all of the other research that I've done on my website and also on Twitter. We hope to keep doing more work in this vein. We think it's really important. And as you mentioned, one of the things that we looked at the end of our study is we said, well, we can't measure, we can measure speeding, but we can't measure every kind of thing that people are pulled over. But, if a similar pattern holds across the board, then, there's, police departments should be sort of evaluating and thinking really carefully about whether the disparities that you see, which are, very large, not just for speeding, but for, things like pulling people over for broken taillights and, similar issues really are justified by, like the underlying differences in people sort of breaking, the traffic laws, or if there are other reasons for these differences. And if there are things they can do that accomplish the same, traffic safety goals and public safety goals that don't lead to these kinds of disparities.
Yes, thank you so much for this important work you and your co-authors are doing. Thank you for joining us, Johan.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
All right, we're going to head to a break. We'll be right back with more of Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Can you believe the nerve of these Republicans? They only want to block progress for our community. They talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. They played politics with veterans' health care. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and funding for our HBCUs, and against lowering prescription drug costs for our seniors. These Republicans keep trying hard to stand in the way, but President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats won't let them. They are delivering for us. The Democratic National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind $100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett.
Yo, it's your man Dion Cole from Blackish, and you're watching
Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Stay woke.
From the 1950s into the 1970s, highways built in U.S. cities profoundly wounded Black communities. Many of these thoroughfares were a part of the federally funded system of highways that went through Black communities, displacing thriving Black businesses and homes. Now, a federal grant will rectify what the construction of one of the shortest signed interstates, Detroit's I-375, did to Black neighborhoods like Black Bottom and Paradise Valley 60 years ago. Today, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg announced a $1 million program named Resurrecting Communities for the city of Detroit for its long-awaited plan to destroy the depressed freeway. Buttigieg says to fix a problem, we have to face and accept what caused it.
Sometimes fixing the damn roads means facing the repercussions of how the roads were originally built, who was included in that process and who was not, who was empowered and who was displaced. And when a generations-old piece of infrastructure comes to the end of its useful life, it requires us to decide in our time whether we're just going to put things back exactly as they were or whether we're going to build back better. And we know that some of the planners and politicians behind decisions in the past built roads like this one through the heart of vibrant, populated communities, sometimes even in an effort to reinforce segregation, sometimes simply because the people who lived there did not have the power to resist and force change. Here in Detroit, when I-375 was built in 1964, they literally bulldozed the neighborhoods of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, displacing so many, mostly Black Detroiters. And now this freeway, a generation later, serves to divide communities, primarily communities of color and low-income communities, from the central business district, the recreational areas, and other great assets downtown. And the freeway design is actually contributing to worse congestion and more traffic crashes on roads nearby. The purpose of transportation is to connect. But we have seen examples in many communities, including here, where an infrastructure decision serves to divide. And we raise this issue not to wallow in it, but to challenge ourselves to do something about it. And now we are putting our money where our mouth is. Governor Whitmer, Mayor Duggan, local advocates, the congressional delegation have supported the application for federal grant funding to fix this, and then did exactly what good advocates should do, which is kept pounding on the door, explaining the difference that this would make in the community, and making sure that this got every full and fair consideration in the process. And the result of that is that today I'm delighted to officially announce that the Department of Transportation is awarding $100 million to transform I-375 to reunite this part of Detroit to a connected, thriving community. This is a very big deal, a long time in the making, and it's going to mean that residents can move more quickly, more easily get between their neighborhoods and opportunities, more safely walk, bike, and drive in their city.
The highway removal could begin as soon as 2025, 2 years earlier than expected, with construction finished by 2028. All right, let's go to the panel. I have so many historians and professors on this one, so I'm going to say any, mini, miny. Michael, you go first with your reaction to this announcement, and just put it in historic context for us in terms of what kind of damage was done to Black communities under the pretext of expanding infrastructure.
Well, you know, Secretary Buttigieg was here in Detroit today. President Joe Biden was here in Detroit at the North American Auto Show yesterday. I live about 4 blocks from I-375. I live in the area that was Black Bottom in an adjacent community, which was the entertainment and business district, was called Paradise Valley. And I-375 comes through in 1964, and it's part of the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts of 1952 and 1956 that drive about 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways all across the country. They run through about 1,600 African-American communities, wiping out homes, wiping out businesses. They're going to displace about 475,000 homes nationwide, which is about 1 million people. Here in Detroit, when you had the 1967 rebellion at 12th and Claremont, which is renamed, 12th Street was renamed Rosa Parks Boulevard, a lot of those African-Americans that were there were originally in Black Bottom and got displaced from Black Bottom, then go into the 12th and Claremont area. So when the rebellion jumps off, they were already upset. But these expressways, this was all part post-World War II. And you have the deindustrialization of the inner cities taking place as the suburbs are being built. White people are getting homes built, a lot of them getting homes built financed by the GI Bill, getting low interest loans on homes, and a lot of African-American World War II veterans couldn't take advantage of those benefits that they earned. And then they're taking the infrastructure from the inner city, the factories and things like this, moving them out to the suburbs, okay? And then they're running the expressways from the downtown business district out to the newly formed suburbs, wiping out African-American communities. And lastly, Buffalo, New York, where the top supermarket is, okay? That area, that African-American area, was an area that was harmed by expressways running through there as well. So this is all part of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that only 19 Republicans in the Senate voted for and only 14 Republicans in the House voted for. So this is an example of how elections have consequences. And I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but sure as hell I'm not stupid. And the Democrats are really the only ones who are talking about repairing this damage. Republicans are silent on this, and many of them don't want to even acknowledge that the damage has happened in the first place.
Ooh, class is in session. I want to stay with you just a little bit longer, though, since you are in the area. What does this mean for residents now? I mean, is this a priority for them? Is this something that you think moves the needle with people really connecting the dots about how it matters? Like you said, elections have consequences, and for too long, a lot of our communities have been left behind when it comes to these kind of packages and these kind of large initiatives. The trillions of dollars are being spent. So what do you think what does this mean to residents now? Not just you, but like the people that you're talking to.
I think for African Americans who are older, like my parents, that generation, I mean, my parents were born when Franklin Roosevelt was president. Okay, so for people who remember what was here in Detroit, it's going to be huge. Now, it's not going to be the same. WXYZ Channel 7 today has a story dealing with this. One of my friends, fellow historian Ken Coleman, is interviewed in the story, and he says it's not going to be the cultural mecca like it was, but it's going to be a boulevard. It's going to help the community. For younger people who don't really have any knowledge of that, this is something that has to be explained to them and understand how policies impact every aspect of your life. Okay. But for people like in their 60s, 70s, 80s who remember what was there, I think this is going to be something really important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Dr. Carr, you are obviously a beacon of knowledge for connecting those dots for your students. How can you help bridge that gap? How can we help communicate? There was a panel, and I don't like MSNBC, I don't pay attention to them, but a panel of younger voters who are just completely disengaged and have no concept of what kind of impact their elected officials has. And this is a very tangible example. So what would you, how do you help bridge that gap? What do you suggest the Democrats do to help really hammer that message home?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is step back and ask ourselves, why now? Now, we know that this money, as Mike says, as he said, Mike wouldn't be here if it were the white nationalists in power. But as Ida Wells said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. This is not a victory. This is a step toward a potential victory. What do I mean by that? You read a book like Sam Yet, a journalist from a generation ago. Samuel Yet wrote a book back in the early 70s called The Choice, the issue of Black survival in America. And he was one of many who was documenting how these highways were placed. I'm from Nashville. They ran 65 through the Black community in Nashville. They wanted to run a highway through Washington, D.C., but they couldn't get the muscle through the local politicians. Every city where there's a Black community, major city, has had a highway run through it. So you ask yourself, why do you want to get rid of this highway now? Well, it's quite simple. 3 words. They're coming back. So, bike lanes and boulevards, this is not for the Black people. So please understand. Please understand. And Mike, you know this better than anybody. They have bought up downtown Detroit. You could buy a house for $1 in Detroit 20 years ago. Now the thing is white hot. Market. What's that boy that ran LeBron James out of Cleveland? Dan Gilbert, whatever. I mean, these guys done bought up everything. So let's take the highway out. And this is not repair. You're preparing it for the pilgrims. This is the history of gentrification. So what I would tell young people is, now that they've gotten the highway out of the way, fight like hell. Why? Because now the property values goes up. So Mike, your parents and all the old people, they ain't gonna be able to stay there for the property taxes. Here come the pilgrims, the single parents, the bike riders, the baby strollers. And it looks like, Black people should have gotten their act together. This is not a victory, y'all. This is just one more step. And finally, I'll end with this, since the Queen of England is dead. I'm reminded of something that Eric Williams said, the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. He said, the British are always talking about they abolished slavery. He said, sometimes I think they started slavery so they could run around the world and give themselves credit for abolishing it. You don't get no credit for taking the highway out, Pete. Now that you take the highway out, you'll get credit if Black people can buy homes, run businesses in that neighborhood. Are you preparing it for the people who look like you, who going to come in with their babies and say, hey, we're Detroiters, while poor Black people are pushed even farther out in the suburbs?
Well, that's not what I was expecting. But I should have seen that one coming. But, we have Secretary Marshall Fudge as HUD. So maybe, you put Secretary Fudge together. I still see him.
It's still homes, Detroit Land Bank. You don't have to get homes with a mortgage.
Yeah.
You can go to the Detroit Land Bank to get homes, things like that. And there are land banks like that in different cities. So, I know Bank of America is going to do 0% down, all that. I mean, if you want a 15-year, 30-year mortgage, you could do that. But there's other ways to get homes that are cheaper.
No, I agree. That's what I would tell young people. Fight like hell. That's what I meant. Right. This is not a victory unless you make it a victory. That's really what I was saying. And that's what it's going to take.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, don't burn me at the stake, but I watch Bargain Block, which is technically it's kind of a gentrification show in Detroit, and they're buying up homes for $1,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, get in that housing market. Dr. Nichols, I saw you nodding along this time with Dr. Carr. So what's your take on this story?
Yeah, see, I'm right back to agreeing with Dr. Carr.
It's hard to keep disagreeing with him. He always brings you back.
I was, and it's funny, I was gonna use the analogy of sticking a knife 6 inches in my back, and then you pull it out 3, and then say, hey, that's progress. So I actually 100% agree with them. I gotta say, I also agree with the idea that you have to make people aware of their options in order to fight. People say fight like hell, but don't give you a roadmap on how to fight. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know what a land bank is. I was intrigued by that. I'm like, what is a land bank? You know, I'm thinking you have to go to Wells Fargo or one of these other banks that discriminates and, you know, and ends up paying out, you know, pocket change to them, but $10 million because they discriminate against Black people. So I would like to know some of these options for Black people to keep their homes, to keep elderly Black people in their homes, to give young Black people who are now renting an opportunity to own it in the communities that they come from and that they're raised in. I think that's really important. I will say there's another element of this that we haven't discussed, and that is when you talk about what happened with the building of a lot of these highways and freeways, not only did they displace Black people, but the Black communities that remained were suffering from noise pollution, air pollution, and other things that actually harmed them and shortened their lifespan. Yeah. So I think that, and made it an undesirable place to live. And, you know, I think about, you know, the things that have happened in Miami and the way that, you know, you have Overtown and the highways that surround it and make, you know, those Black communities are sometimes more vulnerable to flooding and other things that happen in that part of the country.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, if they're going to start rebuilding these communities, they have to give Black people the options or the resources to stay in those communities and to plant their flag, which is ownership. And I'm all about home ownership. You know what I mean? That is the biggest asset most of us will ever have an opportunity to own in our lives. You know, I want to own a jet, but it hasn't happened yet. So my home is what I own. And I want every Black person, hardworking Black person, to have an opportunity to own a home, particularly in the communities where we've been for a long time.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I mean, I appreciate what Michael said about the land bank, but I also appreciate what you said about the programs that are out there. You know, I think it was last week, I did a video kind of debunking this whole conspiracy that Bank of America was trying to trick Black homeowners into mortgages, which, by the way, a zero down mortgage and zero closing cost mortgage, that's pretty good, especially if they're not, you know, jacking up the interest rate beyond the standard market rate. But sometimes we have a little bit of suspicion towards programs that are actually meant to help us. So we do have some bridging of the gap to do to, you know, try to help Black folks understand what's out there and take advantage of it before somebody else does. Because we know that there aren't programs where you can explicitly say only Black people benefit from this, only Black people are eligible for this. So if we don't get it, somebody else is gonna get it. Michael, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, be careful with that zero down stuff, because a lot of times that's balloon rate and it's going to hurt you in the long run. So I'm not saying that that's the case with Bank of America and the program that they've created, but we know in 2008, you know, that was part of the issue was, hey, zero money down, people bought more house than maybe they could afford, and then those rates all of a sudden exploded. And a lot of Black people, particularly around in you know, Prince George's County, ended up getting foreclosed upon.
Yeah.
So I'd say if you have the opportunity, put 20% down. You know, save your coins, put as much money as you can down, so that you can have a lower mortgage rate.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to argue with you on that. Because I say absolutely do not put 20% down unless you have to. Because it's a very competitive mortgage market. I mean, there are so many loan options. I'm on my third house now. I don't own 3 at one time, but I have purchased 3 different homes over the course of my lifetime, and I've never put down more than 5%. So, I mean, the devil is in the details, which is you have to evaluate the program. Adjustable rate mortgages probably aren't the way to go. Especially, you know, you can always refinance later. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to get an adjustable rate mortgage. But this is not going to turn into a finance class. But let me just say this.
That's important.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I just have an MBA. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But, you know.
It's important. I'm glad y'all having this conversation because land banks are one thing. It's very important. But let's be very clear. It's about finance. This is about banks. This is about, okay, I qualify for this year, but will they give you the loan? We've seen this show before.
Yeah.
Black people are going to get run out of Detroit unless we organize and do something different.
And
so this is very important what you're saying.
And to be fair, what you're saying, Dr. Nichols, is accurate in some cases. If you have a lower down payment, you do have a higher interest rate. But in more recent years, it's not significantly higher. So you just have to do the math and determine, is it something that I can buy down? I can use points to buy down my interest rate, which is less than 20% down. So it's all about what works for you. Now, if you're the kind of person that money, it just burns a hole in your pocket, and you know, like, if I don't put this money down, it's gonna be gone at the casino or gone at the mall, go ahead and put 20% down. Go ahead and get a lower monthly payment. But if you're the kind of person that's gonna invest in like an index fund or something else, or you might wanna do renovations on your home, you don't wanna finance that, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, talk to your realtor, or maybe we'll have this conversation on another day. But thank you, fellas, for your comments on that. We're gonna head to a break, and we'll be right back with more of Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I remember being with The View when they said, we want to extend your contract. And I knew God said, it's time to move. It's time to go. And everybody was saying, Sherry, you got a great job. You're making all of this money. And I said, no, it's time. And they said, you ain't gonna be able to, you've been away from Hollywood. And I said, it's time to go. And when I didn't, that's when I realized I was about to go through this divorce and it was gonna be expensive, it was gonna be a lot. And I said, I'm gonna stay. I said, I'm gonna stay for a couple of years.
So you
make this money.
See, go ahead.
I'm gonna make this money and then I'll get out, Lord. So I'm gonna do a compromise. I'm gonna do what you say, but I'm gonna do it on my thing.
And he went, really?
He went really. And you know when he went really? They said that we were heavy in contract negotiations. And they came, my manager called, she said, they're not gonna renew your contract. And I went, hey, so wait, what? Just yesterday, they was offering me more money. She said they just decided not to renew your contract. And I remember sitting in front of the mirror at The View, and I went, what happened? And it was very clear. God said, I told you it was time to go.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hi, I'm Kim Burrell.
Hi, I'm Carl Payne.
Hey, everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Paulino has been missing from Valhalla, New York since September 9th, 2022. The 15-year-old is 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighs 170 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Anyone with information about Angel Paulino should call the New York Police Department at 646-610-5030. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna pull an audible here because I was looking at the chat a little bit, and I just want to stay a little bit longer on the mortgage discussion and on the real estate discussion, if you fellas are willing to go there with me, because I did see some stuff in there that was not accurate. Okay, so I'm just gonna answer a few things.
Also,
okay,
you were gonna come back to me too, Reese.
Okay, Michael. Okay, Michael, he wants to chime in on that too. Okay, I got you. So, okay, let's talk about PMI. That's one of the things that people were saying. You have to put down 20% so that you don't have PMI. That is not necessarily the case. It depends on what kind of loan that you're having. A lot of homeowner loans now, especially ones through credit unions or first-time homebuyer programs like the one that Bank of America has, I'm not vouching for their program, but I'm just saying you don't always have to pay PMI. That's an old school thing. Now, if you have a certain kind of loan, like for instance, there's FHA loans. Those loans tend to have PMI, and they are for the life of the loan. It doesn't even matter how much you pay down, you're gonna have PMI. So it just depends on the kind of loan. So don't think that you're gonna automatically have PMI. If you have PMI on your loan, keep shopping. That's what you need to do. Keep shopping for more loans. The good thing about mortgage shopping is that you can shop around. You only take one hit, regardless of whether you make 50 applications or 5 applications if you do it in a short period of time. So definitely shop around for your mortgage option. But yeah, you don't want to pay PMI. And if you're absolutely desperate and you have to give PMI, then try to get one where it goes away after you pay it down. And then again, going back to what I was saying about the interest rates. The interest rates do tend to be factored by a number of things. It's also factored by your credit score, by your debt to income ratio, by how much money you're putting down. So those are actual factors where you might have a higher interest rate. That's why I said you want to evaluate, do the cost benefit analysis of whether, for instance, a down payment. When I was buying one of my houses, let me say that, I looked at my debt to income ratio. If I can reduce my debt to income ratio by significantly on a monthly basis by paying off $4,000, that's more effective for me than putting an extra $4,000 down on a house. So there are a number of things that you kind of have to look at in terms of how to get the best interest rate, and it's not always strictly on a down payment. So if you have debt, look at what has higher interest rates, what has higher monthly payments. If you have high monthly payments, low balance that you can pay off rather than put on a down payment, that might give you more bang for your buck. So everybody has individual financial circumstances. I'm not trying to give you, I'm not looking at you specifically. I'm giving general information. So don't go buying a house, putting money down, saying what Reese said. All I'm saying is, generally speaking, these are factors that play into interest rates, that play into how much you want to put down. But if you take nothing else from this discussion, understand it's good to shop around for your mortgage loan. Don't just go with the first place that takes you. One time I went with the credit union. I went with a different credit union the second time, and then another time I went with the mortgage broker. But I did all of my diligence each time in finding which loan makes the most sense. So that's my quick little TED Talk on that. Michael, you said you wanted to have another comment.
So very quickly, I did a broadcast with my friend Dr. David Anderson, founder of the Empowerment Radio Network, dealing with Bank of America. I encourage people, number one, to read the article from NBC News. Bank of America announces zero down payment, zero closing cost mortgages for first-time home buyers in Black and Hispanic communities nationwide. So yeah, this is not specific to African Americans. It's just focusing on African American and Latino communities, number one, which is not a problem. But number one, I just want people to understand that. Number two, if you look at page 3 of the article, it talks about Bank of America's countrywide financial, a subprime lender it purchased in 2008 was fined $335 million in 2011 over claims that it charged Black and Hispanic home buyers higher interest rates than white applicants. Secondly, and possibly more importantly, is the memo from the Department of Justice, August 21st, 2014, called Bank of America to pay $16.65 billion in historic Justice Department settlement for financial fraud leading up to and during the financial crisis. This right here, what they announced, is related to this Department of Justice settlement that they paid in 2014. Okay, and it was fraud and people losing their homes with subprime mortgages and things like this. So read this 5-page memo from the Department of Justice, and then you better understand this public relations campaign here. Now, if you can take, I'm not saying don't take advantage of this. If you want a 15 or 30-year mortgage, I'm not saying don't take advantage of it. Okay, but what I'm saying is, Bank of America is not your friend.
Well, none of these banks are your friends. They're all out to make money. That's why you got to shop around. Just like you don't just go to the first car dealership. We have options. That's the whole point. We have options. But I do understand there's justifiable concern because what we saw with the subprime lending and you know, that led to the last crisis. There are a lot of different factors that aren't necessarily at play this time. That probably would not repeat themselves. But I do understand the skepticism, and I think people should always scrutinize and always be critical of anything, especially when you're signing your name on a dotted line. But the last thing I will say about this, one good thing is this disclosure that's called the Truth in Lending disclosure. So what it does is whenever you apply for a mortgage loan or when you apply for any kind of loan, but particularly for mortgage loans, every single application you put in, you're going to get a Truth in Lending disclosure. So it's going to tell you it's the same format, and it's going to tell you all of the information in terms of your monthly payments, all this other kind of stuff. And so you can use that as a way to just do your sanity check and make sure you're getting the best deal. So even if you don't necessarily trust a person, the numbers are what the numbers are, you know, and most of these banks end up selling off your loan anyway, and you have a completely different loan servicer. So you're probably not going to end up with the same bank for the entirety of your loan. So, but that's really good information. And yes, I would be remiss if we did not talk about Bank of America's history, but a lot of these banks have shady histories and predators, still shady. They
talk about that in the article from NBC News, Wells Fargo. Absolutely. They talk about that in the article from NBC News. Absolutely.
Right. So do your homework, folks. Anybody else have a comment? Dr. Carr, Dr. Nichols, do you want to chime in again, or should we move on?
No, this is why you support the Black Star Network.
No, and you can just Google land banks in your city. You could Google land. You can Google Detroit Land Bank. So they have houses. I was on their website. Auctions start out at $1,000 for houses. A lot of different cities. I know years ago when I was managing an African-American owned company, and we were teaching the construction trades program. We bought some houses through the it was nuisance abatement, and these were drug seizures. So you have houses that are drug seizures, you have houses that are tax foreclosures, and they're confiscated. So, you know, if you can get fixer-uppers like that. Yeah, so there are options.
You kind of said it. What's your experience with what is required once you have that property in possession? You said fixer-upper.
It depends. So what happens usually with those, they're on the website, and they will have walkthroughs of the homes also. There's a date that you could do a walkthrough of the home to see what it looks like. Okay, and you can bring like your person who does roofing and things like that to get an estimate. So they usually don't from my experience. Maybe different cities are different. From my experience, they don't necessarily tell you like how much it needs in repairs, but you can actually do a walkthrough and you can go through and see certain things yourself. Okay, so that's one. And what you want to do also, you want to make sure you get a good title company to check and see like who really owns it as well. And then the other thing, if there's a way that you can check and make sure that house is not on the list to be demolished, because that can happen also. Okay, you want to check with the city to make sure the house is not on the list to be demolished, because a lot of times with different cities, different departments don't communicate correctly. And so check that out. I learned from experience. Check that out. Okay.
Well, you learned it, so now you can pass that knowledge on to everybody else. I said the last thing, but this is really the last thing I want to say. And again, I'm not vouching for Bank of America. Don't send me messages. Reese must be getting paid by Bank of America. Yada. No, ain't nothing like that going on, child. I wish I was getting paid by all these people to talk positively about them. But the reality is, what's interesting to me is, some of the criteria for this loan program in particular, it actually kind of does away with some of the more stringent credit requirements. Now, we know that it's, part of the subprime lending crisis was people who had bad credit or people who weren't creditworthy, quote unquote, were given loans that they couldn't afford. But it's really interesting, and I just want to end on this point, that there are certain barriers to Black people obtaining homes, like credit scores, like debt to income ratios, like a lot of these things that a program like this program, not vouching for it, is trying to do away with. So one of the things I just want to say is keep an open mind about, we talk about wanting to close the racial home ownership gap. We talk about wanting to close the wealth gap. But then when programs come along, then we look down, not we, us, but people look down on the criteria for that, when the criteria is designed to help get around the things that are stopping us from obtaining homes and building wealth as a family. So I couldn't let that go by without saying that. So, all right, let's move on though. We have another story to get to. This one is about an Iowa judge who says a girl who was 15 when she killed a man she said raped her multiple times must pay his family restitution. Piper Lewis pleaded guilty in June 2021 to the killing of Zachary Brooks Lewis. Said the 37-year-old raped her multiple times in 2020. Lewis received a deferred judgment from Polk County District Judge David Porter after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and willful injury. Lewis will be on probation for 5 years. She must serve 200 hours of community service and pay $150,000 in restitution, plus more than $4,000 in civil penalties. Iowa law requires the court to sentence offenders to pay at least $150,000 in restitution if they kill another person. Lewis's former teacher set up a GoFundMe page and has raised $330,000. More attorneys find out if Iowa law would allow the donated money to pay the restitution. Okay, oh wait, let me see, is this the same story? Okay, I just wanna go back to the panel real quick on this. Paying the family for their rapist, degenerate, being killed, that's just crazy to me. I mean, if they have any decency, they'll turn around and donate that money or give that money right back, because I would be absolutely ashamed of my family member for doing such a thing. Dr. Carr, what's your reaction to this story?
I mean, class, we've been talking about class all along, but we, haven't said the word class. I think this whole conversation about housing and about ownership is about class. If you're not even in the position to be able to afford a home or anything, and obviously we're not talking about that. I think it's a similar class dynamic here. That family, I'm not going to make any assumptions, I don't know, but the harrowing details of what this young lady went through seems to me is speaking to those who are at the bottom of this political economy. Sex trade, sex slavery, basically. She did everything she could. And this judge, I mean, I think and it'd be interesting to hear what you think, that Nichols and Brother Mike. And reading this story, I thought to myself, okay, this judge is out to get her. But then it's very clear that his hands were tied by this law, which ostensibly appears to have been passed to protect the most vulnerable in these situations. Now, this is an extreme circumstance. So the community service, the fact that There's a possibility of maybe getting out from under this $150,000. There's been $330,000 raised crowdsourced. Now the question is, does the law allow folks who paid this money to this young lady to be able to use that money to pay this off and then maybe go to school? All those things, the devil's going to be in the details. But I don't know that this isn't an example of good intention going wrong in a circumstance where it's very clear what happened, and the judge may have kind of pulled back from doing what could have been done by the law, but had his hands tied on the other end of the spectrum. I'm just not clear at all about that.
Right. No, I mean, that's a good point. And maybe I shouldn't be hard on the family because they're not asking for it. It's required by the law. But it's really just despicable, though, the way that this young lady was, or girl, really, I mean, 15 years old to me is still a girl, had to endure this. And on a side note, it's interesting, Vice President Kamala Harris, when she was in San Francisco, one of the things that she really pushed for is for decriminalizing young girls who were being sex trafficked, you know, because they were being arrested for prostitution. And it's like, how can you be a prostitute and you're a minor and you're being trafficked? And so that's one of the things that she really pushed for prior to becoming DA. She pushed for it again as DA. She put all these initiatives in place to really try to combat this kind of, you know, mistreatment and just travesties that are happening. Dr. Nichols, what's your take on this story?
So what it really brings me to is the idea that mandatory sentencing or mandatory minimums or mandatory anything that don't allow for discretion are very problematic. So the impression I got was from reading the story was that the judge and this young lady's attorneys were actually happy with the judgment. That they were okay with it. But as Dr. Carr stated, this judge's hands were tied on, you know, the monetary element of this. And I think there should be some sort of discretion for a judge whether to apply it or not.
Right.
And in this particular case, you know, when you start making things mandatory and you don't take into account that every situation is different, you know, I think it's, you know, it produces these kinds of problematic results. And, you know, not to get super partisan with it, but, you know, if Donald Trump is able to use people's money in order to pay his legal bills and all of that, I don't understand why she can't use, you know, what people donated to her to pay this fine off. You know, it seems like it's reasonable to me. But in the end, the real change that needs to happen beyond just this case is that you can't have these kinds of mandatory things that take away discretion and looking at these cases on a human, individual basis. And that's what's, you know, the big problem that's coming out of this judgment.
No, I completely agree with you on that. I mean, somehow we're always the ones that get screwed the most when it comes to mandatory minimums. And, you know, Cal Rittenhouse, he raised $1 million after he killed 2 people. So I say, you know, good on her for getting $330,000. Hopefully she can do something with it. If she can't use the money, then they're just not going to get paid. I mean, what do you want the girl to do? She don't have money. So I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know, maybe it might work in her favor if she can't use this money to pay it back, because then she gets to keep all of it. And, you know, maybe she gets a job, making a couple bucks, and, you know, pays 10%, or I don't know. I'm not trying to speculate on what the arrangement would be. But, Michael, you get the last word on this one.
Yeah, you know, this is one of those cases where you have mandatory laws and it's not like one size fits all. We do see here that the Iowa law requires the court to sentence offenders to pay at least $150,000 in restitution if they kill another person. So the judge made the restitution the bare minimum, which is $150,000 also, plus more than $4,000 in civil penalties. At least she wasn't sent to prison. Okay. Right. At least she wasn't sent to prison. So, but you know, with crowdfunding, different crowdfunding platforms have their own policies of if you can like raise money, like if you have pled guilty to a crime or convicted of a crime or something like that. So we'll have to look at the what the GoFundMe guidelines are on this. Hopefully she can keep the money, but we'll have to see on this one.
Yeah, well, I think if there's one bright spot, it's that she does not have to do actual jail time for being a victim and fighting back, because hey, like, what did he say in Time to Kill? Yes, he deserved to die, and I hope he burns in hell. I know that's going to be controversial. Y'all can drag me. I don't care.
No. Like you said, Reese, I mean,
the mental health care that she probably needs after being a victim of sex trafficking.
Right.
So if there's one thing,
mental care. Yep.
The 200 hours of community service. Okay, I guess I'm okay with that, but I think it should be 200 hours of therapy for her as a victim, so that she can continue with her life and be a productive member of society, and maybe even help other girls who go through these things.
Absolutely.
I know we're going a little long here, but Doc, just to follow up on that, the judge did say he was trying to put her in a position to share her story, and he encouraged her to do that. And again, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, Reese, about, you know, those efforts that Kamala Harris engaged in California. This is far too common. We all know that. This is where most of our people are. So many, D.C., Baltimore, Philly, as you say, Richmond, Virginia. You go to some of these places, and, you know, I was shocked. Even I lived in Philly for 17 years. You know, you go out, you in front of a high school. I mean, hell, R. Kelly just got sentenced again. Part of it is you trolling in front of the high schools. You think these young people just hanging out. What you don't see is these pimps are around the corner. They got these girls on the stroll in front of the school. I'm saying this is the tragedy we're facing. And so if she is able to use this platform, as you say, with all the counseling, all the support, tell your story, sis, because there's a lot of people out here. This is not an outlier. This is not an outlier, and this has to stop.
And it reminded me of Centoria Brown. You know, it was a very simple case.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to pray for her, Piper. We're going to pray for you and your recovery and your growth going forward. And I just hope that she's all right. I hope that she's all right, as much as she can be. But we're going to move on ahead to the next story. California Governor Gavin Newsom launches a billboard campaign in several red states promoting access to abortion in California. Newsom tweeted this earlier today. Just launched billboards in 7 of the most restrictive anti-abortion states that explain how women can access care, no matter where they live, to any woman seeking an abortion. In these anti-freedom states, California will defend your right to make decisions about your own health. Here's the billboard. Well, I just have to say, I know that a lot of people, anytime a white man does anything fabulous, they want to say, oh, run for president. Don't run for president. Go ahead and do a good job as governor. But I do want to see more of this fighting spirit trying to shake the table a little bit, because, I've been seeing polling coming out this week about Republicans closing in on Democrats in states that they had been, Democrats have been polling pretty positively. You have Herschel Walker down in Georgia, who wants to ban abortion with no exceptions. And by no exceptions, that means including the life of a mother. And he was asked about that, and he clarified, and he said, in my mind, there are no exceptions. And you have North Carolina, Justice Sherry Beasley is going up against Congressman Ted Budd. He's another one that wants abortion banned with no exceptions. And then you have Marco Rubio, who wants abortion banned with only the exception being for the life of the mother, but not for rape and incest victims. And so we have in governor's races and Senate races throughout the country, these Republicans are not fucking around when it comes to this abortion stuff. In Wisconsin, we have a situation, or they have a situation where in 1849, let me say this, the year 1849, an abortion bill or abortion law is going to be triggered to go into effect in Wisconsin if the governor does not stop that. So Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, he's a Democrat, he's fighting this bill, but his opponent, who's polling very closely, Tim Michaels wants to ban abortion. And so just wrap your head around the concept of an 1849, this was before the Emancipation Proclamation, bill determining what women can do with their bodies in a state in 2022. So I know I got on a soapbox a little bit there, but Dr. Carr, your reaction to just, you know, what's at stake here? And do you think that what Newsom is doing is something that we should be seeing more of? What do you think?
Well, Reese, I think we all know Gavin Newsom is running for president. The only question is when.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, you know, and I would say the only thing in Herschel Walker's mind is mud and old newspapers, which speaks to the larger point. They're not fucking around. These white nationalists they're going to break the United States. And I know people get tired of hearing me say that, but all you got to do is study a little American history. This was never a nation. And federalism has always been used by the interests that have a stake in keeping it a loose federation and advancing their interests. Gavin Newsom is playing the smartest strategy that could be played. There's nobody like him. He's in that huge state with that huge economy, and he is taking on the pufferfish in Florida and that shovel-mouth bastard in Texas, and he is making a point of it. And, you know, when little Lynn Graham trots out his little a national ban, 15-week ban, we talked about this on this show. We knew that once Roe was overturned, the next step was going to be to introduce federal legislation. Graham is trying to salvage what he thinks he's trying to salvage the midterms. But now, finally, what he is doing is basically trying to rally the base, because what none of us are privy to, polls notwithstanding, are the conversations that are being had behind closed doors about how nervous the white nationalist party is, how worried the Democrats are, and Newsom is upping the ante. This is not going to be an election. It's not going to be politics. It's going to be won by trying to find some reasonable middle ground. Sorry, Joe. Is no such thing. This is a goddamned war, and Gavin Newsom is acting like it. So I'm saying keep going. In fact, you saw that letter he put out today where he wants Merrick Garland to put a RICO charge on Florida on DeSantis because he said you lied to those people. That was that kidnapping thing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it. Tear this shit up.
Period. That's the energy that we need. I mean, like, it's blowing my mind that, I mean, maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe this is naive of me. I know we're all tired. We've been in a pandemic for years. We have a lot of shit going on. But, I mean, to me, what Abbott did, and I have to admit, I haven't even been as checked in. I know about Abbott. He's been busing migrants for weeks, you know, or even months in some cases. But to see people dumped in Martha's Vineyard on a plane, and then to see Abbott, he shipped, you know, migrants to the VP's residence. Yeah, and it's just like
Washington, D.C.
Kamala Harris's house. That's racist. It's sexist. Oh, yeah. He's like, UB. And so somebody got to punch these guys in the mouth. That's what I'm saying.
Right. But then again, I mean, I remember when Trump's child separation policy happens. And be clear, the United States, Democrat or Republican, has a bad immigration policy. I'm not trying to cape for the Biden-Harris administration on their immigration policy at all.
Well, they caused the problems. In other words, these people are here because they're messing with the governments in Latin America and Central America. Right. That's the end of These are Venezuelans. Right. Understand that you caused the problem. Right. That's why they're here. Not because they came looking for America. They came because you messed up their government and their economy.
U.S. policies going back the last 50 years to 100 years.
Right.
In these Central American countries, things like this, Guatemala, when the CIA overthrew the Guatemalan government in 1954, democratically elected Guatemalan government. Yep.
Where you go?
And go back to what I was saying in the previous segment. A lot of these countries, they were conquered by Spain. They were conquered under Christopher Columbus, and then Guyana, that was a British colony. Okay, which that was one of the countries. You know, actually about 1952. A little more than 25% of the world population was under British rule. So these are victims of colonization. These are victims of white supremacy. So Abbott and DeSantis, they are continuing this 500 years of white supremacy. They're continuing this. They're in that tradition. Yeah. We have to take them out of power. That's why voting is so important.
Absolutely. But just when Trump did it, and this is where I was going, when Trump did it, with the child separation, people were out in the streets. People were protesting. This was like outrage. And we're just not seeing it this time. And I think this is just as appalling.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, Reese? Why aren't we seeing that kind of out? Is it because the guy in the White House is not Trump? Is that, I mean, why aren't we seeing that?
Well, I think part of it is because it's being covered as a political stunt. It's being covered as, look at this clever thing that Republican governors are doing to stick it to the Biden-Harris administration, as opposed, in particular, stick it to VP because they want to put this off on her. But these are human beings. And so when you look at that, and you look at Abbott, who is leaving no stone unturned. I mean, when he's not shipping off migrants to D.C. or to Chicago, Texas has now banned abortion. They had a trigger law. A lot of attention was paid to SB 8, which led to the Supreme Court case. But at the same time, right around the same time, he signed the Human Life Protection Act, which outlawed abortion in cases of rape and incest. To, I think, was it you, Michael, who said or was it Dr. Nichols that said, how's it coming along with eliminating rape? That was what he was talking about.
That was me, yeah.
Okay.
Gabbard said he was going to eliminate rape when they passed the law, the anti-abortion bill. He said they need to focus on eliminating rape. I haven't heard anything else about that.
Right. Well, abortion is now outlawed in Texas. Including in cases of rape and incest. The only case that you can get an abortion is if you have a medical emergency. We're not talking about a 6-week ban. We're not talking about a 12-week ban. We're talking about outlawed, period. So what Gavin Newsom is doing, and Dr. Nichols, I'll give you the last comment on this. I need people to understand this is the opening salvo for what we're going to see from Republicans if they are allowed to just kind of slip away and slip under the radar with destroying a constitutional right that women have enjoyed, I want to say enjoy, but women have had the right to for 50 years. So Dr. Nichols, what's you get to close us out on this.
Man, I got a lot that I want to get off my chest here. It's funny, DeSantis sent those Venezuelans to Massachusetts. Something tells me he wouldn't do that with Cubans. I think he would avoid putting Cubans on those planes. They would get all the dry foot, advantages that, and they'd be political refugees. But again, and this shows you the kind of hypocrisy here. If you're saying Cuba is some sort of communist dictatorship, then you all of a sudden don't have the same empathy for Venezuela, which again, I don't want to get in on socialism and all of that, but you notice even from their narrative, it doesn't make sense. And he wouldn't do it because it would be political suicide.
Right.
To put little Elian Gonzalez on a plane to Martha's Vineyard. It wouldn't happen. They'd find a home for him in Miami or in somewhere in the state of Florida. Now, as far as Gavin Newsom, I agree with everybody. He clearly has larger political ambition. We'll see when that actually takes place. I think he started puffing his chest out a little bit after surviving that recall, which was a joke anyway, but he started doing that. And, he has those political ambitions, but what he's doing is showing chutzpah, and I think it is really important. And lastly, as far as Herschel Walker is concerned, he believes in children being born, and then he can abandon them later and allow for them, to fend for themselves later. He wants them to be born, but he'll look the other way when they actually come up and say, "Hey, Dad." So I think that there are a ton of issues here. I think the people need to be more vigilant. And, again, Gavin Newsom can stick his chest out when you have a $100 million surplus in your state and you're doing pretty well. So, I think I like what he's doing. I think he should keep doing it. And, the reparations thing kind of got me even more on his side. Right. So I think he's making some good decisions.
Hey, you got to give the man credit. He has political talent, but he also has political luck, too, and good fortune being in California. Right. So, it's a combination of both, but you have to use power when you have it.
You have to use it when you have it. Hey, Reese, just very quickly, 10 seconds. Everybody needs to pay attention to what California, the Reparations Task Force, is doing in that 500-page study that they put out, because it deals with the history across the country.
They driving it in a ditch with that lineage-based thing, man. We got to talk about that.
No, I understand that. I understand that. And they're trying to skirt around the law. They're trying to get around the law. I understand that. But I'm talking about the history that they lay out of racism against that's what I'm talking about, against African Americans and all throughout history. That's what that study documents. Okay. So when we deal with reparations, we're dealing with repairing the damage, not just 246 years of slavery, but what happened after slavery ended, and these laws and policies that are still being put in place today that are still hurting us. You got to that's the generation of reparations that has to take place. But I totally agree with you, because Camila Moore was on the show and explained the whole thing with that. So I totally I understand that.
It's indefensible. But I heard you say on history, no question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, maybe put it in a meme, people will take it and run with it, as opposed to 500 pages. Because ain't nobody reading 500 pages.
Get Cardi B to do a TikTok video. Get Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion do a TikTok video.
To your point, Reese, that's why that billboard you showed is so effective. Gavin Newsom know what he's doing.
Oh yeah. We need more of that energy, because the stakes are just really too high. And I don't know, maybe Republicans are smart. They say, okay, we go after women. Nobody gives a damn, because I'm not going to get an abortion. I can't have kids. I ain't taking care of my kids, even if I do have them. Not talking about anybody specifically. I'm just saying. But the reality... Dr. Nichols is like, I said what I said. But just what we're seeing is deconstructing citizenship. What we've been seeing. They've already done it with our right to vote. They've already done it with diluting the votes that we do have. They're doing it with women and our ability to choose. Contraception is next. Right. The LGBTQ community is next. Education is already on the chopping block, because these Republicans, while they're sitting up there and they're doing CRT and parental rights, what they're doing is defunding the public education system. So that's going to, even if a lot of black people like school vouchers, I ain't judging, but ultimately, I just don't trust any Republican plan, because anytime they got a plan to do something, it's some behind that's a little sketchy. So whatever that we can do to effectively message what's happening, then I think we need to do that. But we're going to head to a break. Roland Martin Unfiltered. We'll be right back right here on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Can you believe the nerve of these Republicans? They only want to block progress for our community. They talk about cutting Medicare and Social Security. They played politics with veterans' health care. They voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and funding for our HBCUs, and against lowering prescription drug costs for our seniors. These Republicans keep trying hard to stand in the way, but President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats won't let them. They are delivering for us. The Democratic National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds. As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys. This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Black TV does matter, dang it.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now. Yee.
Disney released the first teaser for its upcoming live-action take on The Little Mermaid. Take a look. Little brown girls were excited about Hailey Bailey as the Little Mermaid.
Watch my daughter's reactions to the Little Mermaid trailer.
Look.
With the positive news, there is the negative. Here are some of the folks that are upset that Disney cast a black woman to play a mermaid. We have Kaiser, who says The Little Mermaid is a traditional Danish tale, 100% European culture. Stop stealing others, like Pinocchio Italian, Lord of the Rings British, even Game of Thrones is based on European. In fact, 98% of Disney classics are stolen European stories. This is so stupid. Anyway, so Matt Walsh says it isn't scientific to have a black mermaid.
All right, Max Winter says, a black actor playing the Little Mermaid really is a case of white erasure. All forms of art, including fairy tales, are meant to be reflections of the author's experiences and observations. Hans Christian Andersen probably based the Little Mermaid based on experiences he went through in his home country of Denmark, so it makes sense that most of his characters would be white, since that's the world and the people he was surrounded by. Yeah, I'm given the way that we deal with these sorts of issues, I'm sympathetic to that. Now, I would be fine, like we talked about yesterday. We don't have to rehash the entire thing, but if we all agreed that race in films and TV shows, especially fictional stories, don't matter, and we're going to take a kind of colorblind casting approach, and you know, it doesn't matter as long as the actor is good. If we could all agree on that, then I'd be on board. And as I said, that's basically what it was for many years, what it was back in the 90s. But what I cannot abide by is the double standard thing where we say, well, the casting, the race in casting matters only for certain races and not for others. No, we're not doing that. Also, by the way, with The Little Mermaid, can we also just mention that just from a scientific perspective, okay, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have someone with darker skin who lives deep in the ocean. I mean, if anything, not only should the Little Mermaid be pale, she should actually be translucent. If you look at deep sea creatures, they're like translucent. They have no kind of pigmentation whatsoever. and they're just like these horrifying, they look like skeletons floating around in the ocean. That's what the Little Mermaid should look like. She should be totally pale and skeletal, where you can see her skull through her face. And that would actually be a version of Little Mermaid that I would watch.
That's embarrassing.
Freak. I bet it is, you freak.
I mean, look.
Girl in the bottom of the ocean, I bet he would watch that.
Well, I mean, if we're being scientific, didn't y'all come out the Caucasus Mountain? Or no, y'all ain't from the ocean too, last I checked. Okay.
Look, but the Danes were trying to figure out how to cook food when Yemaya and Oshun were coming out the ocean and the river. So let's be clear. You don't know, and I like what Mike Harriet said. He said mermaids are by definition biracial. But let's be clear. We ain't got no dog in this fight. Y'all remember Blazing Saddles when Cleavon Little showed up in town and it was like, the sheriff is near, the sheriff is near. Then he got close and they saw he was black. The sheriff isn't. When she came up out there water, I'm like, y'all should just make this a satire. Because I ain't got a... Disney is trying to make all the money in the world. They got a Muslim Miss Marvel from the comic books from Pakistan. They're gonna make Namor the Submariner Latinx when everybody who reads the comics knows he is white as the sheet. Shang-Chi is Chinese. His Shuri may be the Black Panther, may not be the Black Panther. And they're gonna put this Israeli girl in the new Captain America and is setting off bells over there with the Palestinians. Disney trying to make that cash. The reason that girl is black is because they see the demographic, and the most important words to be heard is when these children said, "I can't wait to go."
Oh yeah,
that's right. I mean, that's all Disney care about. So the mermaid is here.
I get the anti-capitalism aspect of it, but as a mother of an 18-month-old, almost 18-month-old, I have to tell you, when there's this little show on Disney called Eureka. And it's a brown girl in prehistoric times, and she has purple kind of, hair, and it's really funky. And Ava just goes apeshit every time it comes on. I mean, she's like looking at me, and she's like, and she starts dancing and swinging around. And I mean, it brings so much joy to her.
It doesn't scare you, Reese?
Does it scare
I used to have my godson in the back seat, and every time Barney come on, he go into a trance. I don't let no kids watch anything that these corporate people program, because it's like, wait a minute, how the hell you're a child? I don't trust that.
Well, listen, there's probably as much crack in Disney stuff as Beyonce has in her Renaissance album, so we're all in the same boat of being transfixed with things.
No question.
So, I mean, for me, part of the fun of it is starting to be how just completely unhinged these people are about it. Like, I didn't have interest in the Game of Thrones prequel, even though I watched Game of Thrones. But now I'm like, well, let me check it out, because this black guy is pissing them off, or the Lord of the Rings thing they have going on. They're mad about the black people. Like, these are not real characters. Y'all already don't see black people as human anyway, so it should be less of a stretch to see black people play a half mermaid, half whatever.
Well, yeah, with the Lord of the Rings and these other fictitious science fiction things like this. First of all, they act like they never heard of the African Moors that went all throughout Europe, intermixed into the European population and changed the complexion of many Europeans. Number one. Number two, I remember back in 2015 on the History Channel, they had a series called Barbarians Rising. And it dealt with like 700 years of invasions of the Roman Empire. And the first episode dealt with Hannibal Barca, Hannibal of Carthage, and the Carthaginians and the Punic Wars. And they portrayed Hannibal as an African, which he was. The Carthaginians, descendants of the Phoenicians. And some white people lost their minds. And it wasn't a brother like you had to look there and look at him for 5 minutes and listen to the tonality of his voice to determine if he was African descent. No, Nicholas Pinnock, you can look at that brother. That's a brother right there with a thick black beard, okay? So they were correct. A lot of white people lost their minds. This ties into white fear. This ties into Roland's book. Yeah. They're seeing these demographic changes here in the country, and not all white people, but these people that voted for Trump. They see these demographic changes in the country, and they can't handle it. And then they go to their escape. They go to their escape, which is science fiction. They go to their escape, which is a Disney movie, and then Negroes in the Disney movie. They're gonna have an Andy Griffith marathon because there's no black people in Mayberry. They keep trying to go to their escapes, right? And we keep popping up. So. And then you look at the YouTube, the trailer on YouTube has 1.5 million dislikes, things like this. So a lot of these people have just totally lost their minds. You know, they just totally lost their minds. So
look at I'm sorry, look at it though. They're gonna make that money up in the Spanish market. Disney is global. This movie, these hillbillies in the United States ain't gonna stop this train. They're gonna make that money up in Latin America.
Oh yeah, they're gonna make it. African Americans go see it. And I understand. My daughter's 5 years old. You know, and I watched the whole thing of the little girl's reaction to it. I'm glad I saw it before here because it brought tears to my eyes. Here, my daughter's 5 years old, right? My daughter loves Paw Patrol. She likes Sesame Street. She likes Doc McStuffins, things like this. So we need to flip this and like do lectures dealing with like the origins of the mermaids and where all this stuff comes from, things like this as well. But this is you know, just the reaction from many Europeans is just, you know, you don't have anything better to do than this?
No.
The attack Haley Bailey, you don't have anything better to do than this? You know, so.
And I have to say, Haley Bailey, I met her at the VP's residence and for Juneteenth, and she's so she's like a mermaid in person. Like, she's just so lovely and sweet, and she has this just really divine voice and this great energy. So I love that for her. I love that for little black girls and everybody. And, you know, I'm gonna be honest, I don't let my kid watch like the super white cartoons like Coco Melon. I'm like, oh, everybody got green eyes, blue eyes, everybody's super white. I'm like, where are the black cartoons? So she watches, you know, Motown Magic. I'll let her watch the animals. So she does Word Party, other kind of stuff. But I'm happy that there are a lot of shows for her to watch. Don't judge me, or you can, I don't care. But I know a lot of people don't like their kids watching TV. But
God, for Nollywood, because I mean, somebody got to tell our stories that we have. I mean, Disney is not for us. Disney out there trying to make money.
No,
so I mean,
I understand.
Thank God for the African film market, because at some point, when we get our act together, the American Negro gonna be sitting somewhere with our $5 in our hand, talking about. Anyway,
well, that's true.
African market, things like that. But what I think also it's important for us to do, and you may want to weigh in this, Greg, if we have time. These white supremacists are largely attacking this African American woman. Haley Bailey.
No question.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't want that to be lost in this whole Disney movie. Okay, because she talked about, I was reading an article from Screen Rant where she talked about her grandparents encouraging her, I think it was her grandparents encouraging her in dealing with these white supremacists and these attacks on social media, things like that. So that's a layer that I don't want to be lost in the white capitalism, the corporations, and you know, things like this.
I don't know what to tell you.
Dr. Carr is like, hey, that's what you signed up for.
I don't know what to. At some point, we're going to have to make some decisions, or some decisions are going to be made for us. So this diversity, equity, inclusion approach to liberation, of course, is a complete and utter dead end. So yes, she should be defended. We have to deal with that.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But let's be very clear. As you said, Reese, if you have power, use it. So we shouldn't be the ones defending her. Disney needs to have all the smoke for every white supremacist that they have contributed to their political campaign.
Yeah.
That they have emboldened. In other words, this is not our fight. This is Disney fight. Because Disney getting ready to pimp the black community for another $2 billion, like they did Black Panther. So when these white boys come for her, it don't need to be us. Yeah, we should say, but it need to be Disney. And Disney's not going to do that. Why? Because Disney don't give a damn about her either. This is all, you know what I'm saying? I mean, so I don't know. I don't have an answer other than you got to have your own stuff. We make our own documentary, and we've done this.
Right.
We've done this.
Right.
But I mean,
going back to Oscar Micheaux, going back in the early 1900s.
But at the same time,
we had race movies. When we had race movies.
Well, we got Gracie's Corner on YouTube. We got our own stuff. But guess what?
Disney.
When it comes to a kid and cartoons.
Exactly.
Hey, I'm Team Disney on that one. I know, Dr. Carr, you can drag me, but I am Team Disney. Dr. Nichols, you're shaking your head. Go ahead. What you got?
Yeah, let me get a word in. I have a 3-year-old myself, and I understand my 3-year-old loves Peppa Pig. So she's sitting around here walking around talking like a British person. So I will say this. I think it's important, and this was kind of stated, but I think it's important for us to make cartoons for our kids.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You better believe Matt Walsh, who you just showed, who I think was trying to be funny with that whole translucent thing, but he's not funny.
No.
But at any rate, Matt Walsh works for the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire
White
wants to
supremacists.
get out of political content and get into cultural stuff. They want to make movies. They want to make cartoons because they realize that some black kid, probably too, is going to be looking and see a cartoon that engages them, but is secretly giving them political messages. It hurt my heart. One of the things that hurt my heart so much about, I don't even like saying his name, but a guy from Philadelphia, who, he made Fat Albert. And that was so important for kids my age. That was so important for us to see a bunch of black kids who lived in urban communities and how great that was. And then, conversely, I remember as a kid, when I was young, you saw He-Man. And this is what tripped me out. My boy pointed this out to me. Here you have this white, blonde-haired, muscular guy, and he's the master of the universe. I was like, hide it from us. You know what I mean? And then, of course, G.I. Joe was trying to get us all to join the military. So, again, they're sending our children messages through this kind of stuff. And it's cool when you have a Doc McStuffins. And it's, The Little Mermaid, I think some of that story, just like Beauty and the Beast, I wouldn't let my daughter see it because I think it, tells them it's okay, deal with somebody's abuse. Talk about it. I wouldn't let them see it. I think it sends the wrong message to little girls. That you just be patient with somebody while they abuse you. I think it's important for us to make the kinds of stories we want to see instead of advocating and saying, hey, big capitalist white company, please please show me, please take the same recycled story that we've seen 100 million times and do it over again, rather than when we've got so many great black children's authors who could, their stories could be made into cartoons, and you can't even tell me that you need a big corporation. My kids used to watch this guy named Blippi. I don't know if you've ever seen him.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Absolutely.
And he's a random dude who was going nowhere with his life, and he just put on a colored hat and started playing with toys outside his apartment in the dirt and filmed it. And now he makes $20 million a year making children's content. He doesn't even like kids. He said it in an interview. He's like, I don't even like kids.
Wow.
But he has been able to monetize this, and kids can't take their eyes off of him. And now he's got a cartoon, he's got his live action stuff. And I think we can do the same things. Just like the stuff Roland is doing. I'll give props to Roland for a second. The stuff Roland's doing by trying to, I read he was promoting HBCU sports and all of that, going into sports content. I want him to hire me because I have the best sports commentary in the world. I'm always right. But I think that we need to expand into children's material, because guess what? That's when they're trying to get our kids when they're young and give them subtle messages, about what they want from us.
Yes, right. Turn mommy water loose. Let them Negroes from the Caribbean and West Africa. Ain't no mermaids in the African women been in the water since the beginning of water. And that's a whole different story. That whole weak woman, princess, that's how you end up with Queen Elizabeth dead, and the Star of Africa in her scepter, the largest diamond in the world. In other words, that whole women are weak. the whole cultural model is anti-human. It's not even good for white people. So nah, you're right. I agree with you, Doc. I don't know about letting any children look at this patriarchal stuff. The Little Mermaid.
And just very quickly, when you look at the origin of a lot of these stories we tell our children, Cinderella, Snow White, King Midas, Rumpelstiltskin, things like this, they originate in England. Okay, so they orientate our children to kings and queens and Europeans being in power, Europeans being in control.
And to murder. Humpty Dumpty and Humpty Dumpty is about a plot against the king. Rockabye Baby is about killing the next heir. In the treetop, the baby, down will come cradle baby and all. In other words, these people talking about murder and it's all in their children's stories.
And of course,
our children's stories had a violent nature to them, and they were toned down. And then they were brought here, and then they were toned down and fed to the children, but we feed it to our children.
You know, I needed another mom on this panel with me because I'm outnumbered here. I'm the only one.
No, we're not beating up on you.
No. I'm just saying. Listen. I guess I'm the unserious one because I can't wait for this, and I love Hallie. But let me close it out with this tweet, which I thought was hilarious. It says, "So after all the Africans y'all threw in the ocean, y'all surprised a mermaid is black?"
Lord have mercy.
Listen.
That was incredible.
I saw that one.
Come on, we got to keep the same energy. Y'all want us, what we doing? But fellas, it's been so much fun with you all. Thank you for sticking around a little bit longer and waiting for the show to start. I'm sorry, I was a little late.
No problem.
But Dr. Jason.
Good to see you, Greg. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you too, man. And good to see you, Doc. Oh, you know what, Reese? As you say, with a black woman in the chair, we have to remember those 6 children in September the 15th, 1963, who lost their lives. The 4 little girls at Birmingham in 16th Street Baptist Church, and the 2 black boys that were killed, one by a cop and another by a racist in the streets of Birmingham today. So, with a black woman here, it's fitting you're in that chair on the day that those 4 little girls lost their lives. The anniversary was its 59th, I think, in a year anniversary.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Carr, for that reminder. I did retweet it earlier, but I'm glad you brought it up. So it's been a great show. Thank you, Dr. Nichols, Dr. Carr, Michael Imhotep. I'm Reese Colbert, signing off for Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Go cop my books if you're out there. They on Amazon. I know we anti-capitalist, but my books are on Amazon, okay? Good night, y'all. Holla.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.